Okay, noting the time and the presence of a quorum, I call this meeting of the Acton Finance Committee to order. We are anticipating that one of our members may join us slightly late on Zoom. If he does, then we'll have to take all votes by roll call. If he does not, we will just continue to truck on along. First order of business is public participation, and I can safely say I don't need to spend any more time on that item. The next item on the agenda is a sort of a first blush, a first view of the budget presentation that we received last night. I'd like to start by saying to the committee that I apologize that we had our joint session with the select board so close to Budget Saturday on a Thursday, now on a Wednesday. But hopefully we will remedy that next year. That said, the town manager was very open about the fact that this is a iterative process, and so, standard rules apply. We can't get too late in the season before things have to be settled. But if questions arise, please don't think that by tomorrow or by Monday are your final opportunities to ask questions. Okay. With that, I'm going to start by opening up the floor, but if no one speaks, I'm going to come around the table and ask everyone for their opinion. So I'm going to open it up by saying, who would like to start? What was their first impression of what this is, and where do you feel we need to? Where do we feel we need to make suggestions? Actually, I'm going to take one half step back and say, definitely do want to try and ask questions for tomorrow. If you don't wait for me, send the questions directly to the town manager at this time, because we're right around the corner. It's literally tomorrow, and then again, I believe on Monday is the other one.
Monday is Martin Luther King Day.
Must be Tuesday then. Let me open up I have all this down on the latest email that I sent to everybody. So, opening it up, what was everyone's first blush? I'd like to say, gang, I thought it was great that you came in at the absolute last minute to weigh in last night. Feel free to start us off tonight if you'd like.
Thank you.
Pass him a microphone. Jeez.
So I'm gonna start. So I think to me it's nice to see that they provide more narrative and detailed numbers in the budget document. It's also nice to see that they mentioned several initiatives to seek state grants, to share costs with some other municipalities. So those are the cost saving or cost cutting initiatives that I'm happy to see. And what I'm a little bit disappointed is that in the point of view that the finance committee present to the select board, I think a central theme is that we want to avoid another override. We want to keep the cost affordable. We want to keep the increase of the budget rate that is at the same rate as the inflation rate. But what we're seeing last night in the presentation is that first, the budget is going to increase by 4.5%. Number one. And number two is that we see that the DPW building still keeps at $43 million. So that's we don't see that the opinions from the finance committee and from the residents could take in consideration into these budget initiatives. I would expect to see more of that in the discussion of how they can further keep the cost down and keep the public services affordable. With this 4.5% increase in operating budget and the DPW building at $43 million, it's likely that after this override, that exclusion override, we might see another override years ahead because we see that some these cost drivers still there. The health insurance keeps going up, and the retirement costs also keep going up, and some of the external service costs keep going up based on what I read of the document. So without some cost cutting initiatives, I think we're likely that we'll see another override in the future, and I don't think that's responsible.
Anyone else wish to weigh in? Or we'll go around the table. Go ahead.
So I've been looking at the numbers a little bit more closely, and just so we're clear, the estimated revenue increase is 2.13%, right? That's what they're projecting. But the cost increase is close to 5%. So are we just assuming that the school budget is going to be much lower, that there's some wiggle room in there? No, okay. So I don't know why we're not talking about that. It just doesn't seem like this is going to work. Like, just pure numbers. So we got to start cutting some things, right? It's just kind of strange to me to put forth a budget that literally does not work at the outset. But maybe that's normal at this stage? Is this typical? Yes, okay. All right, so that gives me some comfort, perhaps, that's just all part of the process, but that's kind of what I'm zeroing in on, right? And so we have to go through and say, oh, well, maybe we can't add that additional HR person, the additional, I don't want to say we can't add the firefighters or the police lieutenant, because I think that's what was recommended. The help desk person, do we need to ask that person? Do we need the DE&I position? I don't mean to pick on them, but these are the sorts of things we have to talk through. What can we take off the table to make the numbers at least match? If not, the costs go up a little bit less than the revenue goes up. I mean, it's not rocket science, but that's where my head's at right now.
Ditto what she said. One thing I was looking, it looks like you wrote some stuff down, like I like the way they put like the FTEs, the changes for every department, and I want to go through this, I haven't had time, but I want to go through, like, what's the whole thing, like department, FTEs, and just so we can see the whole thing, because as Steve pointed out last night, the biggest driver and the increase for this year is primarily salaries, and if it's not FTEs, then is it contracts? Or if it is FTEs, then where are they and do we need them?
So real quick, I did go through, and in some departments, the salary costs are going up 55%, even though there's not a change in the FTE number. So it's almost effectively like they've added
And I
an
wondered
FTE,
sometimes
so.
if that was because like a person started in the middle of the year and something happened, like.
And those are definitely things I want you to capture and ask. That's the purpose of the Budget Saturdays. In years past, we've actually tried to carve up the budget into different sections and assign them to different people, but with less than 1 week notice, that was not, with no meeting in between, there was no way to do that.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I have already requested a table of FTEs by department,
Okay.
for the budget for what's currently on the payroll and what the 26 budget
Okay.
represents.
Thanks, that'd be great. The other thing I was noticing, as Allison was saying, was just the overall trends, and I said this last night, the school budget continues to go up. Like, I know there's not this rule, apparently, I was told there's not a rule about the split, but if you do something long enough, it becomes the rule. And the school population has been going down for 17 years and is projected to continue to go down for the foreseeable future, as far out as they're projecting, which is FY33. But their budget is going up faster than the towns. So their budget, they're projecting, just over 4%. So like the 3% this year, 4% next year, then 3.9 for the next few. The towns is going up 3.8. Okay, so it's a little less, but still it's less. And if the town population is going, and enrollment is going down, it seems like that should be flipped. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
It's not as direct or clear of a delineation as you would like. The population that require more work from the school, that are more expensive, basically, has been growing significantly over that time. In addition, the requirements put on the school to serve those people have gone up. In addition to healthcare, a lot of the driver last year for the need for the override was based on out-of-district placement. And we know they were allowed a 14% increase in 1 year on what those costs. And those are kids who cost a ton of money, and we
Right.
don't know if any given year if that's going to come in. So it's not this
Right,
just
but
straight.
even last year, the majority of the school's problem was with salaries, so they were under contract. And this year, they're talking that they're already $2.5 million
No,
of
but
the whole.
it's salaries for people to meet the higher needs kids, because more of the students are higher needs than there were
But
before.
they weren't talking about FTEs, they were talking about salaries. Like, so whether the population of the students aside, they've got these teachers under contract, there's a teacher's contract out there, and it went up by like $4.9 million in 1 year. It's like, goes under contract, how would they not see that coming? And now they're saying they're $2.5 million, you know, that in the hole right now. And again, these are contract costs, right? I think they are. They're salaries, so they should be, I don't know how they're being surprised by this.
Well, the school's not claiming to be surprised by this at all. They've been doing the cuts. They've been cutting every year. If you look over the last 3 years, in FY '23, they cut 20.6 FTE. In 2024, they cut 14.4 FTE. Last year, they cut 20.1 FTE, and I believe they're scheduled to cut another 20 this year. Is that the results of the?
It hasn't been finalized.
So when they talk about the cuts from the last 3 years too, they cherry pick that number, that FY '21 year, because they added a ton of positions when they created the virtual school. And then they did not,
I quoted you FY '23, '24, and '25.
24, okay, but I'm saying they have been, you can look at this, stuff's on the DESI websites, the total number of like regular ed FTEs, the special ed stuff and the English language, the high needs, those numbers have gone up for the educators and the staff, but the regular ed teachers stay the same. And you can find that on the DESI website. So, and I think a lot of times when they talk about the FTEs, they go after these classroom assistants. And I think we even saw that with the budget task force. Their recommendations were not structural. They were geared towards efficiencies and repurposing money, and they pretty much targeted specialists and assistants.
Okay.
We'll talk all about that in my budget task force.
Okay,
But if I don't speak to it, remind me, because
okay.
that all came up.
But just in general, so that's my overall thought is, like I said, 25 years of declining enrollment, and the budgets keep going up 3-4% a year, 4% a year. They go up way faster, the per pupil cost goes up way faster than the rate of inflation. So,
Steve?
I thought I covered this last night, but I was very happy to see we sold something. Kennedy parcel. As I said last night, this budget increase is being driven by salaries, healthcare, and Middlesex pension primarily. Middlesex pensions and assessment, healthcare is basically a premium increase at this point. And so what we can deal with to an extent is the salary line. However, there are new positions and we need to know exactly how much each is budgeted for. We also need to know how much they're already committed for from contracts that are in existence, because we can't touch that. So to me, the dilemma we're going to face is there justification for trying to cut back any of the salary line? And if not, what do we do? The salary numbers could keep going like this for quite a while. Middlesex pension has always been a 6 or 7% increase every year, and health insurance, 10% increase. It's better than last year. But looking forward, it's going to be that probably going forward the next 5 years. So what we're looking at in something like 4.5 to 5% escalation, not just this next year, but every year, because probably 70% of what we spend is compensation related.
just so we can make sure that we have everything ready for all of you for tomorrow night. And so this is something, Steve, that I think you and many of you brought up about the FTE counts. And so what we have worked on the past couple of days, specifically since last night, is this is my question to make sure that what we're doing is what you're expecting to see is, and I think Allison and Corinne, you mentioned this as well, is the FTE on one page where you can see all the departments listed. So administration and finance, land use, health and family services, and then you'll see the fiscal year 25 FTE, you'll see the fiscal year 26 FTE, and then the reasons for those increases, decreases, a very short explanation. So in the end, you will see 228.783 FTE. That's literally what it is. And I think what you're also looking for
Well,
is,
if I could interrupt, I would also like
sure.
to know the current FTEs.
Yes.
As of December 31st, you know.
so.
How many of those are open? How many of those are out?
That, yes, yep, absolutely. So we have that as well. So we have vacancies. December 31st, 2024 is a date that we can be very close to. And the reason why I say that is that on December 31st at 8 a.m., it was a certain FTE. At 5 p.m., it was a different FTE count. But with that, I think that, Steve, to your point, is that you're just generally looking for is that right now, on or around December 31st, what is the FTE in relation to vacancies? Is that,
Yeah, we're trying to get a handle on, of the 25 budget FTE count, how many are still open? Or actually, how many are filled? We can calculate how many are still open.
and then the last part, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go.
The last part is, like you said, what is already committed?
Yes.
So if we've already negotiated, which we have with AFSCME, which is our DPW, which includes highway, cemetery, transfer station, facilities, and also Teamsters, which is dispatch, then those are already committed numbers. We know what they are. And is that,
Yeah, that's
What
what I'm
you-
looking for. And I'll throw you a curveball. In the compensation reserve, do you think you have what you haven't negotiated covered?
so that 200,000 that we have in comp reserve is for the three major unions that are currently being negotiated. So that would be fire, patrol, and superiors. Those are the three biggies.
Okay.
Meaning that the three largest union as it comes to FTEs, and usually then the more costly ones. But that, yes, that's what that comp reserve is for.
It would also be helpful to know if there are any FTEs that we're required to keep because of some state or local requirement. You know, if there's any sort of statutory requirement that we have a person that does X, Y, or Z, then we know that's, if they're not already covered by contract, then we can't touch that either.
Sure, meaning like current FTEs, like for example, the veteran services officer.
Yeah.
Community must have a veteran services officer.
Right, so we wouldn't, you know, if for some reason we were discussing FTEs that we could take off of the 26 budget, obviously we can't touch that one, yeah.
Yeah, there are a few like that. I think we're required to have a public health nurse. I don't know how many policemen we're required to have, firemen, you know. We're required to have policemen and firemen. I think my focus will certainly be on the FTEs and the salary line. And like I said, this is not just this year problem. The debt on the DPW thing is one thing, but there's also, if you look at the 10-year capital plan, quite a bit of other spending that we can, I think it's safe to assume that most of it will be included as opposed to excluded debt, but that may not be the case. But in any event, it affects the taxpayer the same. The past 5 years, we've benefited from that debt line going down. the next 5 years, we will not have that advantage. Some of the newer members, if we get into an issue of it's still too big and what has been done in the past, and I've not always been a fan of it, is to use more free cash to plug the holes in the budget. It's not a good policy because you usually should use free cash for more one-time items and recurring costs, but those are the kind of discussions we'll be having for the next month or so.
Thank you. First, I want to thank Steve for going through all the numbers because I had a little fire drill
I
at
did
work.
not go through all the numbers.
Just the ones you wanted to look at. So I appreciate you doing that because that, and I, just some random comments before I make my main comment. I think that the operating budget, I would like to see it at 3%, like we had suggested, and it's already been mentioned, so I won't go further on that. As for the schools, I feel like the cuts over the last handfuls of years have been felt by the students. And I feel like the school's doing a good job trying to manage to their numbers. But as to my main question, thought, with Steve's numbers showing that the operating budget's going to be going up around 5% a year, and if I assume that the DPW building is built, my concern is that the unknown project, which is not in the capital plan, that's going to have to be done, will not be able to be reasonably financed without an override or another tax increase. And listening to the people from the town talk about the facilities, it seems like every building in the town needs work. And I'm just concerned that there's going to be, that the way the budget is constructed today is going to create if there's an unknown, like asset repair that has to be done, or that we lose funding from the state, for whatever reason, we could have a gap that we just can't fill without another override. And I think and then I think if that happens, then everybody's budget is going to be cut dramatically. So that's just a concern, just a concern.
Roland.
So, looking at the presentation last night, I echo pretty much what everybody's saying. We would look at the CIP, right? It was one of the slides. And one that's noted was, all the fire stations need work, right? We know that. Except for the new one, obviously. And it needs new windows, but we're just going to defer that again. And that, to me, is one of the things that you can put into a building, put new windows in, and it'll start saving you money right away because the windows are more efficient than what's there now. So it's going to reduce your heating and cooling costs because they're new windows and they're sealed. Or that even if they open, they work properly. And that's something that starts having an immediate payback to the town. Even though it costs money, sure, maybe something else you can defer on CIP and put that in there and get this. Roof design. We're redesigning roofs. I think the design's already built, the building's already built, it has the roofs, roofs are already designed. Figure out what you're gonna put on for shingles, strip the old ones off, put new ones on, you're done. I mean, we're not redesigning the roofs. The other comment that I made last night was the streetlights. We're gonna have a design of streetlights. You can drive around the town at night and see what streetlights are out and replace the ones that are broken. The ones that we have now in town are LEDs, they're highly efficient. What's out there that's more efficient than what we already have? I mean, the other thought I thought is fireflies. We can maybe breed them and put them inside the lights every night. But seriously, we don't need to have a study on streetlights. We need to replace the ones that are not working, and that's the end of the story. It's like my comments last night. You drive by the lower fields, or you drive by the tennis courts. The lights are full blaze. You can land a space shuttle on the damn things, and there's nobody playing. There's nobody using them. There's better ways to monitor our electric use, and as we said, be more sustainable. The parking lot lights out here, they're on all the time. And at 11 o'clock and 12 o'clock at night, there's nobody out there. Why are they not on motion sensors that they go on if something trips them off? And the cameras come on, and the dispatch can look at them and go, oh, geez, is somebody trying to break into town hall? I mean, we have the cameras, we have the technology. Let's use those type of things and turn the lights off when we don't need them. You know, the town wants to be sustainable. The easiest way to drop and use less fossil fuels is stop using electricity. Use less of it. You know, so those are the things that I think that are easy things to come up with. We don't need studies for streetlights. We don't need to redesign roofs that are already designed and the buildings have been built for 50 years. So think of ways to more efficiently use our resources than to do things that don't really make any sense.
Thank you. Greg?
Yeah. A short comment on two things. First of all, when Steve summarized that the big deltas were salaries, health insurance, and the Middlesex pension, not only did I take notes, I thought, damn, he nailed it. So one of the things that we're going to be spending a lot of time thinking about is people's salaries, because that's where the budget swings. I didn't mention this last night because the chair had already talked about the difference between a 3% increase, and I had written down 5%, but yeah, I think it's 4.5, whatever it is. Yeah. So I didn't see fit to mention that last night because I was in agreement. But let me just mention it now. I'm in agreement. Heading for 3% is the right number. Putting those two things together, what it appears that we need to focus on tomorrow night and next week, and perhaps for the next month, is a series of decisions. The one that surfaced last night is the percentage of budget that goes to the schools versus the town. That's the big number that everyone's focused on for as long as I can remember, and that goes back a ways. I think what we also need to begin thinking about, particularly since I don't see 4.65% growth as sustainable, is other micro swings within the town. Are we spending more now on, let's say, police and less on fire than we used to? Or did it swing the other way? And is that swing in light with things that are happening that we need to deal with? One of the things that we've noted is, there are far fewer students in the schools. There are also, I think, more seniors in the town. And so some of the swings that we're going to see in the micro budgets may reflect a changing town. But it will help, though, as we go through that process, because we're going to have to make trade-offs for us to have some context. And I think the number that I don't expect to have by tomorrow, so this is not a please turn this around overnight, but this is a set of numbers that I think all of us are going to want to look for, find, analyze, and decide how we feel about, is what this year's budget is proposed to be, what the budget was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and is our increasing emphasis in some departments versus others reflective of a change in the town's demographics? One of the things that I've noticed in terms of demographics is one of the interesting numbers that's missing in Acton are people who are 20 to 35 years old. And part of that is normal. Kids go off to college and don't come back to Acton. But what is not normal is they used to get backfilled by young families who would move to town who can no longer find starter homes. So one of the interesting things that we're dealing with as a community, and it shows in the budget, is that, yeah, we probably are spending more on seniors, but need to because they're there. Are there other consequences of other demographic shifts that we haven't matched up? And so context will be really important. And as a consequence, the questions that I indicated to the town manager last night that I'm going to focus on tomorrow and next week, because I can ask questions. You don't need to do homework to ask questions. Each of these departments has goals that are now written down. That's great. That's a marvelous starting point. You got to know what it is you hope to achieve. The thing I want to ask each one of these department heads is, okay, which metrics or key performance indicators are you using to know that you're achieving your goals or falling short of them? And that may be very different for the fire department than it is for the police department than it is for the, recreation department. That's fine. Different metrics for different departments. But the questions that I'm going to ask, and I don't know that we have answers yet, is, okay, what can we do with the same budget to be more effective? Or conversely, can you achieve the same measure of performance with a smaller budget? So what can we do to either be more effective or more efficient? And in that process, I think we will begin getting to this question of what kind of community is Acton that we need to fund. That's essential. And oh, by the way, if we're going to whittle down from 4.65 to 3, what gets whittled? Where do we draw the line? And if you asked me today, are you for the new police lieutenant? The answer is, I don't know. I got to see, if there's a surge in crime that we need to deal with, then yeah, I guess we need to deal with that. But if we're doing a really good job, then it becomes a kind of like, okay, help me understand why suddenly we need an extra position. So there's no right or wrong answer yet. It's a context. So one of the things I will push for in the next week or so is to try to frame that. Where are we growing, and is it reflective of demand? And what are we trying to accomplish? And having a goal is a good step, but turning up for work is not meeting your goal, it's turning up for work. And we need to go beyond that.
Thank you. Alex, you are under no obligation to say anything this evening, being on the job for 2 whole days. Did you want to weigh in, or would you?
36 minutes. I'll at least introduce myself.
Please do, yes.
And then I'll pontificate for a second, because I like to do that anyway. Hi, folks, new associate member, Alex Lenz. I know a few of you here from outside of this building. This is my first meeting, and I'm 36 minutes into it. So my background is in finance, accounting, and operations, and what I would add to think about when we are coming into budget season is a little bit of a story. Before I rejoined the giant behemoth of a company, Olympus, that I'm at now, I was at a biotech startup for 5 years. And we didn't have a budget because we had, pulling ourselves up by the bootstraps. I mean, we had a budget, but I worried about, were we going to make payroll on Friday? Every Friday. And so when we looked at budgeting, we were down to days, like day to day. And what we ended up doing a lot was what is our fixed? What's our variable? Well, we don't have money to do this. Where can we become more efficient? And so that resonates really deeply. We got down to the mouse click. Where can we save down to the mouse click? And yes, that can be, extrapolated to a town or to a 35,000 person company, because turning the lights off at night, that ends up saving a significant amount of money. So when we go through all of that budgeting process and have those conversations, what's fixed, what's variable, what are all of the trends year over year, and what are the outliers? And if we can't slice things, where can we become more efficient, right? Because everybody's looking for this Friday's payroll. And we want to make sure that we can provide that for everybody. So I'm not up to speed with the whole budgeting process, so that's about as much pontificating as I will do. But I'm excited to be on board and to get up to speed quickly and to add some benefit to this team and to the town.
Welcome to the committee.
So, thank you.
At the risk of, make sure you hold something in reserve for the second part. Okay, good.
Marianne, in the listing of the FTEs, could you tell us how many of those are benefited? Because my understanding is you'll combine multiple part-time, and that being an FTE, it's the equivalent when you add a bunch of those up. So not everyone is salaried, not everyone gets the benefits, et cetera. So some FTEs much cost significantly less than others.
Yes. Thank you. Yes, we can provide that. We can divide the benefited from out of those 228 FTEs, which ones are benefited.
Yeah.
So for those who may not know, the town of Acton, full-time is 40 hours per week. And so to be in a benefited position, you have to work at least 20 hours per week. That's across the board with every community. It's half of what your FTE is, of what your full-time equivalency is. In Acton is 40 hours. So most of the part-time non-benefited positions, 19 or less, most of those are at the library, but we absolutely can do that and show you that.
Yeah, that would be good to know. I don't imagine it's a huge thing, but get that in our minds
Yes.
would be great. And I've done the unusual thing of sitting here and listening so much to everyone that I have forgotten most of the thoughts that I had in my head.
That's why I wrote my
Responses. That is clever. I, because of life, have not had a chance to look at the budget report. But sitting back, going back to our listening session, and a lot of the various things we've discussed about real life versus this, how we live our lives is, if we add something, the question is, what are we going to cut back? And Dean brought this up a little with adding the, formalizing the childcare subsidy, thank you, into the budget. That's never going to go away. Things don't get cut, and they don't tend to get smaller. It is very hard, because there's someone who uses it and depends on it, and it becomes an expectation that people want to support them. But we're in a time where we can't do that. If I add something in my house, I cut something else back. And I have never heard the town, and please tell me if I'm wrong, talk about what's been cut back. Every budget presentation that I've listened to is, here are the new things we're doing this year. Not, here are the things we've stopped because we're doing these new things. here's where we have cut back on other things. I believe a bunch of that has happened, because I know that the town manager has combined departments and other things to keep the town staffing as streamlined as it is, but it's not a part of the discussion, which means it's real easy for it to fall off the table, out of mindset. So I would like, first of all, to be told that I'm wrong, and that I've just missed the 5 pages where they talk about everything that has been cut. And I can tell you, the discussion, if you pay attention to the discussion the school's having around the budget, is completely different. They are at the point where it's, we know we have to make painful cuts. How are we going to make it hurt the least and have it be the most efficient with what we have left? It's just night and day, switching 2 different entities right now. And I will tell you more about the school budget later.
Dave is not online. Dave is not online. So the chair, advantage of being the chair, I get to go last and not ask the same question that other people have asked, but try and put a slightly separate spin on it. Not only would I love to see the FTE numbers currently, I'd love to see what they were 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 7 years ago, something along those lines. So we have some way of being able to measure which way we're going. And this, I believe this is super important if we're going to have the zero pie argument about the school versus the school district versus the town. If the argument is they've lost enrollment and if they've lost close to commensurate number of FTE, well, then that's kind of a wash. Similarly, so I'd love to know what the historical comparisons have been. In our point of view, we did show that over the last, I believe it was 7 years, maybe it was 10. I'll call it the point of view. There was one number, and I can't remember if it was 7 years or 10 years, where inflation's up 50%, inflation's up 39%, and we're up 50%. That's the crux of what we're trying to get at here. This is what we mean about having to talk about having to bend the cost curve. In particular, I would like to draw people's attention to the current ALG spreadsheet and make sure that we all understand what's going on here. As was highlighted and very well described by the town manager last night, they have a total operating increase year over year of 4.65%, despite the fact that we sent a point of view as early as possible saying we think 3 makes sense. It is important to note that that 4.65 is including with all of the excluded debt, everything. It's a sum total number. And I want to specifically point out that we cannot do apples to apples comparison this year, because if we do apples to apples comparison this year with a total assessment from ABRSD coming in at 0.97%, it would look absolutely ridiculous and would not be a fair comparison, because so much of the school debt is coming off this year. So let's look at operatings, the operating expense line. The town operating expense line is calling for an increase of 4.9%. The school operating increase line is calling for 2.93%. And I am happy to say that for the first time in what feels like years, the Minuteman number is not an absolutely eye-popping, oh my God, percentage, coming in at merely 3.19%. So I mean to call all of this out because we also like to spend quite a bit of time in this committee talking about what does this do to the average single-family tax bill for next year. And the average single-family tax bill for next year is going up merely 2%, which sounds wonderful in a Prop 2.5 world. But again, I would remind you that the only reason it's not going up 2.5, 3, 3.5, including the new growth, is because of the capital debt that has fallen off. We must remember we have to pay attention to 2 separate constraints. One constraint is Prop 2.5. The other constraint is the ability of the taxpayer to pay. This coming year, the ability of the taxpayer to pay is only going to be hurt, harmed, dinged by 2%, which is a whole lot less than it's been for the entire 10 years that I've been on this committee, save for one, where we came in with a one handle, and I don't remember why that happened. But it is also important to remember that we will continue to be constrained by Prop 2.5. And if we have the school district coming in at 2.95, which is within our guidance, and the municipal side coming in at 4.65 or 4.9, which is well above our guidance, the fill in the drain of the bathtub is still not balanced. We're still about to have an issue where we are going to have to come back for another override. I think the optics of even attempting to have any budget over 3%, and I'd love to be able to ding Minuteman for this 0.19, but it's a small number, and we're going to be in big trouble if we try and fight the other 8 towns on that one. I think it is absolutely wrong to come back the year after an override that only barely passed by the skin of its teeth, and to go back to business as usual with an operating number that is well above what could possibly be met, to Allison's point, well above what could possibly be met with revenue when you're constrained at 2.5. Call it 3, call it 3.2 if you have a really good new growth year. We're not going to get there. We're going to be back here for another override sooner rather than later. I also, separate topic, although the exact same point of view, going for a debt exclusion the year after an operating override, I just cannot fathom. That blows my mind. So I'm not asking for ALG guidance now. We're still like 3 or 4 weeks out from an ALG meeting, but we are going to come back to the standard ALG questions. Do we want to hold the line for this 3%? Are we, to Steve's question, are we prepared to go below our floor on free cash in reserves? Are we comfortable using every dollar of the capital stabilization fund? Are we fine with using all of it on this one project right now? These are all things that we have to discuss and decide before the next ALG meeting. I would like to suggest everyone keep an open mind tomorrow and on next Tuesday. Ask your questions now, but when we have our next Finance Committee meeting, which I did call up the dates so that I have them right here next to me. When we have our next Finance Committee meeting, which will be the listening session on 128, we absolutely will need to take time after the listening session for ALG guidance and figure out where we want to go from what we've heard back from the questions between now and then. I see two hands raised. Give me just 1 second. I have a separate topic. Go ahead.
The senior center closes at 7. Our meeting is from 6 to 7. I don't know how late we can stay after that to continue our discussion. I kind of imagine that will be an hour of listening to people and not much time for us to talk.
I don't want to take up a minute of if we're only allowed an hour, I want it to be entirely for the listening session in the hopes that we get enough people to show up. Okay. Marianne?
Would you be able to coordinate so we can stay later?
That would be great. But to Christi's point, I don't want to take a minute away from the public on these public listening sessions. There were 2 other.
2 things. So, one, I don't like going below the floor, because what happens if we have another storm like we had in August last year, and we're waiting for overtime and everything else, that money has to come from somewhere, right? So very low that we would advise going below that floor. We didn't know that was going to happen that day. Believe me, I didn't know. I was working and boom, it hit. And then all hell broke loose. The other one was when we looked at the CIP yesterday, they talked about ordering a new fire truck for $1 million. Now, a couple of years ago, a new pumper was $675,000. And that wasn't that long ago. Now it's saying 1.2. Kind of reminds me of the DPW cost escalation. And when we were looking at that a while back, I said to the town, and to the fire chief, have we ever looked at Howe and Howe, which is a company in Maine that builds fire trucks on a commercial chassis. They're sold to governments all over the country, used in airports. They're four-wheel drive, and about half the price of a Seagrave, or whatever the other big manufacturer is of fire trucks. Heck, at that price, we could get two of them. Put one in South Acton and put one up in North. So,
Just as long as we don't have to build another fire department.
so those are the ones these are the things that we should be asking ourselves as a town. What are the exact needs? You know, I understand wants very well. And as I've always said in the past, if it's a want and it's not a need, if it's a want, we don't need it. So I think we need to keep that in mind as we go through these budget talks year after year.
Is the fire chief tomorrow or Tuesday? You'll get your opportunity.
I'll ask.
Did I miss somebody on? Steve?
I just want to give a brief history of the split, because I hear the term thrown out a lot, and not everybody understands it, and sadly, I was there. And by the way, Christi, I don't like the implication that I don't have a life because I did look at the numbers. I am retired. But the split goes back to 25 years ago. It was split on revenue, and the revenue excluded debt, meaning it was an operating cost number. Also excluded enterprise funds and revolving funds and all that. For a while, it was the sole product of an ALG, and it was argued about down to the 5th decimal place. It then kind of progressed into, but there was never a fixed formula. Every year, the ALG would get together and argue about hundredths of a percentage point. It then migrated into well, it won't be a fixed formula, but we'll look at kind of what each side needs this year, because the needs do vary. And way back when, we had some of the highest pupil-to-teacher ratios in the state, and we were also well below the FBI guidelines on patrolmen per 1,000, and well below the National Fire Protection Association guidelines on firefighters per 1,000. In short, we were avoiding overrides, but we were understaffed in every critical role. So it's then kind of migrated into more of a look at budgets than at revenue. And so now the tug of war has become who has the greater need. And the last 20 years have not been totally declining. There was a bump, an unexpected bump when Avalon opened. And, you know, all of a sudden we needed a whole lot more sections and a whole lot more teachers. Now, Select Person Martin is sitting in the audience, and he will say that chronically the town has gotten the wrong end of this split, and I would not debate him on that, because as often in the case is, that's how it worked out. But there's not been and never has been any kind of a fixed formula. It's always been an argument whether you did it by algebra or by need. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Go
I just
ahead.
have a quick question for Mary Ann. You said that FTEs, if they're more than 50%, they get, they're benefited. Is that a state requirement or is that a town thing, that anybody that's 20 hours or greater gets benefits?
So that's a good question. I don't know exactly if it is a law or if it is local or like at what level is that decided. I do know that I worked for the state for 21 years before coming to the town, and every state agency was the same. It was actually a 37-and-a-half-hour work week, so anything over 18.75. I don't know of any community that does it differently, but that doesn't mean that that may not be the case. So is your question that if it's possible, could benefited positions be only for like 30 hours or more? I'm guessing, why not if it's not something that we're not abiding by? If that's what you're generally looking to see.
Yeah, and I think this applies to town and schools, that I know, what percentage of, like, for health, what percentage do employees pay, do you know? Or, like, what's the split, town employee?
For health insurance?
Just health
or-
insurance, for
Health
example.
insurance is a 75-25 split. So the towns pays 75, the employee pays 25%. That's for both town and school.
Okay,
We have even though we're split, we have the same health insurance plans, the Blue Cross Blue Shield.
right.
And right now, if you do have a PPO, it is a 50-50 split, because the
They're
preferred
less
provider
expensive.
organization is more expensive than an HMO, low deductible, or the
Right.
HSA. But also I want to add is that under John's direction, so the past 6-7 years, is that we rarely will have a 20, 21-hour, 22-hour position to make someone just benefited so they can get the benefits. He's really strong about that, where, you can work 37, 38, maybe, or you can work 4 or 5 hours. But rarely will you see 20, 21
Right.
hours.
I wouldn't want to see us paying more in benefits than salary for an FTE, for a part-time.
I'm sorry, what?
I wouldn't want to see, I would hope that there's not, like I said, I think what you're saying is probably true, but you wouldn't want to see part-time FTEs getting paid, their benefits cost more than their actual salary. Because health benefits could be expensive, especially if they're pulling a family health insurance plan or something like that.
Right, and that's, to your point, that's where if it is like a 20-hour position, if that was being done, and, health insurance is total for a low deductible plan, 100% of the premium is, say, $26,000. You get close to what maybe that person's annual salary is. That's hence why we don't do that.
Right. Okay, thank you.
So I believe it is actually state law.
Okay.
And it has to do with all the mandatory benefits we have in Massachusetts, that 20 hours, if you employ someone for that much or more, then you're required to provide those mandatory benefits. But I'm not town council, so we could probably get, the actual. Yeah.
I'll get used to that. All public employees over 20 hours, state law required to offer benefits. And full-time is considered anything over 32 hours.
And it wouldn't just be health insurance, it would also be mandatory sick time and all the other
Yep, and
benefits.
the other
that we have. Yeah.
Medical leave, all of that good stuff.
Many municipalities, I don't know if there's any municipality, but the Paid Family Medical Leave Act, we are exempt.
Thank you. Alex?
Thank you. Going back to the, thank you, sorry. Going back to the 3%. Where did that number come from?
This is why I wish we would have a chance to meet on Friday. This is part of the Prop 2.5 restrictions. And we're going to go into a much more detailed discussion of this, you and I offline. Prop 2.5 says you can raise the tax levy up to 0.5% to a total of 102.5% of the previous year, but you're also allowed to fold in any new growth that occurred during the previous year. And so we've had Historically, we've said that throwing a dart at where we think new growth will be every year, we've called it about 0.5%. I think it's always been at least 0.5%. Sometimes it's 0.6, sometimes it's 0.7, but it's not usually a huge number. There are people who will argue that new growth is in and of itself potentially dangerous because with new growth comes new responsibilities. We'll be happy to have that argument as part of the FinCom 101 training. But one of the things you will also hear from when you interact with the public is Prop 2.5 says my tax can only go up 2.5%. It's not entirely true. It's 2.5% plus new growth. And so we have to pay attention to where the new growth is coming in. So that's why we, as a committee, tend to settle on 3.1 on any given year. Anything other than that, anything higher than that, then you are absolutely, it's straight arithmetic. If you're raising your operating costs faster than that, and you will run out of money and you will require an override in due time. Short and sweet? Good. Okay. Come armed with questions tomorrow. But again, do not think that tomorrow and Tuesday are your only opportunities to ask questions. That said, let's not run much past the second week of February because they've got to finalize their numbers and get them to us. ALG might end up arguing right up until the end this year. Who knows? We might have two reasons why we may not be at consensus this year. Life could get interesting. Greg's light's on.
Yes, question. Since we're talking about a debt exclusion override, does that require an AB budget? Or since if it gets voted down, it has no impact on the rest of the operating?
It does not require an AP budget, no. Okay, I'm going to say that that's good for the first blush of budget conversation, unless there's something we need to circle back to, and moving on then to cost-cutting initiatives review. Christi, floor is yours.
All right. The elementary budget task force out of the school district has completed its work. It completed it in December. The findings were presented to the school committee on December 19th. I recommend skipping past the public comment because that got a little distracting, and actually seeing the presentation that Tori and the consultant they brought in covered. It was really a wonderful process. It was members of the community, citizens at large, and teachers and staff from various buildings. So we got to learn about how different parts of the school work, what various pains the teachers are feeling, the staff members, et cetera. And it led to very respectful conversations and decisions at the end. What we were asked to do in the final 2 days were to examine areas of cuts with the goal of identifying within agreed ideas of what we wanted to have the school still maintain, ballpark $1 million. And they came up with what those would happen from. Some of it is improved efficiencies. You can I said before that it sounded like it could be too good to be true, because you're just going to take it and make sure people work more efficiently. But they're all working hard now. So some work will fall off the table, and that's what's going to have to go away. So right now, the reading specialists do not spend as much time as you would hope in doing their reading specialist work. They have a lot of meetings they have to go to. So a proposal, and the consultants worked with districts around the country, proposal that they found to be highly effective is to focus and make it a priority for the specialist to work with kids a certain percentage of the time. And if it means they can't make all the meetings, everyone else has to figure out how to make that work. Another one is share specialists. Specialists tend to be those part-time positions, and they are often assigned as one per school. But schools have different number of classrooms, so one art teacher is teaching 18 classrooms, and another one's teaching 23. That one with 18 does a bunch of other things. They're not just sitting around being paid for those extra hours that they're not teaching, but we can save a whole lot of money by sharing them across schools. It needs to be done intelligently. It takes some finesse to get it to work. It requires losing some of the community. You no longer, I mean, you have your art teacher you see, but they're not there for all of the assemblies and all the other interaction points because they're working in other buildings too. But it's an opportunity to maintain the service of having all these specials at a lower cost for us. Again, you're going to have to figure out what work isn't getting done by them not being there, all those holes they fill, but then that work is recognized and some of it is just going to have to fall off. And we're talking about cutting and very explicit in every single meeting that this is uncomfortable, but standard way of doing business doesn't work. That a lot of money needs to be cut from the budget and that the operating model of the school district needs to change. That we've reached the point where they've cut all the teachers that they can. We're at a point where we just need to do things differently, can't just hope that things will get better. They said budgets are cyclical like this, and this is the downswing, and you can't count on it happening, the improvement happening soon enough to get out of this. So it's real structural work that has been looked at that will make long-term benefits. So their main things that were agreed on amongst the task members all kind of voted were cutting classroom assistants back. The one idea floated was if you got rid of all of them, it would save like $600,000, but it ends up they do a lot of things that you need. If you got rid of all of them, then you'd then have to hire people to cover the lunchroom and to cover recess and other things. So getting rid of all of them isn't feasible. You'd then have to pay other people to do that same work. So they are looking at dropping that between 25 to 50% of classroom assistants. They are talking about making it so that the reading specialists and math specialists either you could have them in their current role, keep the same number you have, teach more kids. So you're getting, because they're spending more time, more of their time teaching, they can teach more kids. And there's some other work you can do to make it even more effective, and that's happening. Or you can say, we'll serve the same number of kids and cut back on the number of specialists. And so that is one of the things that the school committee is looking at, which way do we go with it? Again, with the very blunt recognition that if you don't cut that money there, you have to cut it somewhere else. So there are going to be changes, and nobody likes any of this. I think that was it. It was the specialists, and the classroom assistants, and the specialists using it two different ways. It was the PE, art, music, et cetera, that was sharing those amongst the schools, cutting classroom assistants back, not eliminating, and figuring out how to use the reading and math specialist time better. And those are made significant differences in the budget. Now, they had to go back and look at contract requirements. Most reading specialists of that type will spend 75%, like the ones who are working well spend 75% of their time with students. Contractually, there isn't that sort of time in the AB day because of the half-day Wednesdays. So we're looking more like 64%, which is going to change the actual numbers that we have to work with there. But they are very uncomfortably having the discussion about how to make these structural changes. So it's not just we save money this one year or we kick the can down the road. It's not a short-term savings. They are looking at making real structural. And we will hear more about it come school budget time. That's it.
I have a follow-up, but I'll let Greg go first.
You know, I attended the December 19th school committee meeting, so you participated in the process. I watched the presentation, and I was very impressed. They tackled really tough issues. Not everybody was in agreement, but They got to basically almost 90% consensus on these are the tough choices that we need to make going forward. My impression sitting there in the audience, and actually David and I were sitting there together, so we were both watching this meeting, was that, wow, this is something the town side needs, a similar process. The schools sort of had to do it sooner, but this is one particularly, if we're going to get that curve down, we ought to at least envision some similar process going forward for the town.
So that actually feeds very well into the follow-on questions that I had for Christi. Last year, Christi and I were on ALG. I know Scott's got the baptism by fire this year. But last year was Christi's third year on ALG? Fourth year? Third year on ALG. Okay. And in the, let's be clear, in the bruising battle that was last year's override conversations, one of the things that we, as a finance committee, consistently asked for was, we asked both entities to bend the cost curve to help make it to stave off another override for as long as possible. We even threw in some unused tax levy capacity, so there was some ability to play some Jenga in case it was something that cost something upfront, but would have years of benefit in the future. And so my question to you, being part of it, and to anyone who will listen to it, do you feel that this elementary budget task force met the goal of adjusting that arc? Or partially, a little bit, none? I mean, obviously, I don't think we're on a 100-year path of never having to have an override, but.
Yes. Task Force 100% came out with the depressing agreement about what needed to happen. It then, unfortunately, has to face the light of day in what is allowed contractually. How much of what was agreed can really be done has to deal with the minutia of that. And then the school committee needs to be convinced. And that's going to be the big.
So would you say that this is what came out of this would be a level services budget, or is this another cut?
This is a cut.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely, no question.
So would
This
this
is
be
a
at
cut.
least,
This is the right kind of cut. Well, they could do it either way. Depending on what they decide to do with the reading or the math specialists, they can cut the staff and continue to serve the same number of students. Or they can serve more students. If they serve more students, it's not a cut. They've mostly found really clever efficiencies, improvements, but they bend the curve by doing that.
so they've met what we asked them to do last year. They've
Yes.
started to bend that curve.
Yes.
And they're on a more sustainable path to having more years between last year's override and whatever X date the next override is going to be. Am I putting words in your mouth on that one?
That is entirely the case, and I can tell you that, and Greg, please say if you had a different opinion, that the school committee was not 100% comfortable with that idea.
Not only were they not comfortable with it, but all the unanimity you normally see in the school committee fractured quickly. So let's put it this way. These were
unanimity in the school
tough, hard issues, and you could see Acton versus Boxborough. You could see people who'd been elected recently versus people who'd been on the board a long time. This was a serious effort, and as a consequence, this was not oh yeah, sure, fine, we can do that. This was a hard, tough process. And I just caught the end of it. But one of the things that I guess I noted was, and this is, let me say something that I will regret. They had an outside consultant who knew what he was doing. And you normally, I know, that'll come back to bite me someday. but he'd been through enough other districts who had found 47 reasons not to make changes, because nobody wants to make change, and was still able to get people to come to a realization, oh, if we don't make the change we want, then changes we don't want are inevitable. And that, to me, was the value of the outside consultant. You don't have somebody who wants to be liked in town pull that one off. This is one where the guy can go back to wherever he came from, but damn, he helped get them to where they needed to be.
Well, that is the sort of Damocles that hangs over us every year that we have a conversation about an override, right? Every year that we have a conversation about an override, the argument is either do it in a planned method or have it forced upon you and through a chaotic method. So I'm glad to see that he was able to present that in a cleaner manner. Please, this is yours.
It occurs to me, thank you, Greg, that I forgot to mention the great stuff we do. It ends up open enrollment is accidentally brilliant. One of the most expensive things for a school district is having, balancing, having the correct number of teachers in each school. Because we only put kids where there is room, whenever a new student comes in, we have close to perfect teacher-to-student ratio across the board. There was like one classroom that was an outlier.
It avoids the silo effect.
It also means that increasing classroom sizes is not a feasible way to decrease the budget. You would, if you increased all classrooms, because remember you're across grades and you have to work within buildings, and it's why there wasn't even real significant savings from closing Conant. You have to add 5 kids per classroom to get rid of a single classroom. And that's across the district. That's like, think of in grade 5 or something. It's just not worth it. Plus, concerned with open enrollment. Open enrollment is the correct phrase to use because school choice means something in school language.
In the state language, yeah.
Yeah. The transportation cost is something people are concerned about, and the number of times the bus drives by your house. The number of times the bus drives by your house costs so little, it's not worth thinking about. The number of buses you have and the number of bus drivers are what drive the cost. Because we are regionalized, and because we have a really good transportation district management, we pay $300,000 a year for our bus system after reimbursement from the state. He said, you can't do better than that. He said, you could work your butt off to try to cut that in half, and it would be such a waste of time. He said, you don't see numbers this low. There are a few things that we are just, from everywhere he's looked at around the country, doing really, really well. And he gave us some real kudos for that. So I know it's hard, and you look at some of the stuff and think it's obvious that should be low-hanging fruit, but ends up we lucked into the open enrollment.
Okay, if that's enough on the school side, would you like to do you want to have any comments on the listening session on the 28th? Because I know you will not be able to attend that session, if I'm recalling properly.
I'm hoping to be there.
Okay,
But
I thought
put
you
me
said
in no, put me in a 50%.
Gotcha. So if I have to step into your shoes, what do you want to make sure that we accomplish at the next meeting?
Same thing we did last time, and I will send you the seating questions I have if people don't.
The seating questions.
Yeah, just if people aren't
Seed.
Got it. S-E-E-D.
Got it. Very good. Yep. The one thing, just the one piece of logistics on that, I know I need to figure out, I got to get a Zoom meeting, and I got to figure out how to make sure that that's as accessible as possible, and I don't know the COA that well. So that's on me to get down there and get, thank you very much, Marion. You've been a huge help. Speaking of Marion being a help, if anyone's noticed, the website now has the accurate depiction of all the members of the committee, and hopefully everyone, except for Alex, is on the distribution list and is now getting emails when I send them out to the distribution list.
And it only took a year for me to get on.
Well, there you go. There you go. Okay. Anything else you want to say on the, okay, then we're good on that. That brings us to Finance Committee business. It is not on the agenda, but I'm sure no one is going to give me a hard time about this. After last night's impromptu advice that we, as two separate boards, attend a couples counseling session moderated by someone else, I think everyone please pull out your handy dandy phone schedulers. One of the things that we need to discuss is when are we going to have this, this therapy session with the moderator. I did have a chance to speak to Select Board Chair Arsenal today. And so I'd like to discuss a couple of, I want to come back to her with a couple of possibilities on dates. The other thing is that she and I did agree that we're going to ask in this order people to be our moderator. We're going to ask Bart Wendell first to be our moderator, but knowing that he's got a ways to travel and is not officially a town employee, he might not be able to do it. Second one, we're going to ask town moderator Joanne as the, if Bart can't make it, if Joanne can't make it, our next ask, and she hasn't been advised of this yet, we're going to ask Pat Clifford. And if Pat can't make it, we're going to, our fourth layer down, because it's important to have redundancy in your systems, is Bill Mullen. So that said, I would like to come back with 2 weekend dates and 1 weekend day that works, just in case. 2 weekend dates and 1 weekday date, just in case there are members of the select board that can't do weekends. One of the things that was suggested by Chair Arsenault is the day of the DPW walkthrough, which I believe is the 25th. Let me make sure that's the right day of the week. Yes, Saturday, the 25th is a tour of the DPW building. January. We have to, I believe we have to get this scheduled absolutely no later than, I believe it's February 12th is the next February 11th is the next ALG meeting. And then with the school budget Saturday on a Saturday being Saturday, the February 8th, I think we should try and get this done before February 8th. Also, in the interest of making sure they have as much notice as possible, let's hash this out before the next ALG meeting, because the first Monday in May is coming quickly. Do I have multiple objections to Saturday, January 25th?
Do we have a time suggestion
No,
or just a day?
just a day for now. If there's a time of day that works better for you, let us know.
How long do you expect this to go on for? I mean, are you going to talk about 3 hours? Are you talking about an hour and a half, or?
I honestly don't know. I've only been here for 10 years, and I've never been sent to couples counseling as a committee before.
I know, so that was kind of, I mean, we've had joint meetings in the past, but they weren't really joint. They weren't really joint meetings, if you get, you know where I'm going with that.
I get the feeling this is a throwback to the old school initial years of ALG, where you actually got together in a room and hashed things out.
So if we do that on, oh, you're saying Saturday. I was thinking Sunday at like 7 o'clock at night. Or
Okay?
6 o'clock at
I
night.
hear Sunday at 7. Anybody good for Saturday at 10
AM?
a.m.?
Are we allowed to open and drink it?
Depends on where we hold the meeting now, doesn't it?
I'm out of commission theoretically until the 29th.
Okay.
I might be able to do it.
And I know I'm going to lose,
okay.
I might lose one other if we slide into February. So are there major objections to Saturday and Sundays?
No objection, but evening is better for me because of kids' activities during the day. But I'm,
Evening meaning 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock or 7 o'clock?
7 o'clock,
Even on the weekends?
even on the weekends, yeah.
Rats.
But I'm an associate member, so I don't need to vote. So,
Fair enough.
yeah.
Fair enough.
I'd rather do Saturday morning.
Saturday, 10, 11? 10, 11?
For the opposite reason that I'd like to get away from my kids for a few hours on the weekend.
I really love that honesty and appreciate it. My kids are 17 and 16, but I do remember. I do remember. Okay, now, let's also, so we'll go back with the 18th and 19th, the 18th for sure.
18th in 4 days, you mean?
25th, sorry, 25th and 26th. Okay. Is there any day the week of the 20th? Any evening the week of the 20th? Obviously, the 21st is.
next week?
Yep, so next week, Monday is out, it's a holiday. Tuesday is the town budget workshop.
And can we please skip Wednesday, January 22nd, which is the first presentation of the Economic Development Master Plan?
So I know Thursday, the 23rd?
I can't do the 23rd. I don't need to attend. I mean, you can just take notes of me.
And Friday, the 24th. Okay, I'm going to suggest Thursday, the 23rd at 7-ish. I'm going to suggest Saturday, the 25th at 10 or 11, whichever works better for them. I'll offer up Sunday, the 26th at 7, even though I might lose somebody on that one. Are those three?
Yeah, I think those are good times.
Will I get quorum for any of those, all of those, even if it's a different set of quorum for the different days? Okay. I'm gonna write it down, and then I'm gonna do a show of hands again. So I said Thursday,
23rd.
1/23 at 7 PM. Show of hands, who can make it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yep, good. Saturday, 1/25. What time is the walkthrough at the?
10 to 12, I thought.
10 to 12 at the DPW building? So Saturday, the 25th at noon. I have quorum. Sunday, 1/26 at 7 PM. I have quorum. Those are three options I will give to the select board so that hopefully that gives them a day that they can meet as well. And any objection to this, to the list of potential moderators in that order? Excellent. Very good. Next thing.
Would we be meeting in this room?
Meeting TBD, place TBD. Let's, I think on something this short, we have to find a time that works. And between here, ActonTV, the public safety facility, the high school gymnasium, the back room at True West, I'm sure we can find a place where we can have this meeting that meets all of the public meeting requirements. Next thing, True West does. The next item is, we have 4 sets of meeting minutes that I sent along late this weekend.
Yes, I have.
I have only one edit, but we'll take them by meeting. The first meeting is 11:05. Do I have any edits to 11:05?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So it says, Mr. Borden commented, this is in relation to Acton Conservation Trust. They are the monetary authority. It's monitoring authority.
Monitoring authority. So
So
that
they
is on 11:05.
monitor the deed restriction.
Okay.
Every year, they have to go through the property, the conservation restriction, whatever you call the document.
So you would like on page 2, where it says, Mr. Borden commented the ACT is a private entity and who joined the ACT, they are the monitoring authority.
Correct.
Very good. Are there any other changes to 11:05? We're going to take these at the end, thank you. 11:19, I have one edit. On page 5, line 5, where I said that the DPW building needs to be pared down, pare it down, they have PAIR. I have absolutely no interest in having a twin set of DPW buildings, so please change that to PARE. Any other additions, edits to the meeting minutes of 11:19?
That's actually a very innovative proposal.
11:25, I have no edits. Does anyone have any edits they wanted for 11:25? And similarly, 12:10, I have no edits. Roland, you have an edit.
Yes, Mr. Borden confirmed transportation funds, the buses around town. I didn't confirm that. I guess that was my question was, how are they funded? And inquired about where the South Acton train station funds go. That was my gist of that. So I didn't confirm anything on transportation.
Okay, so
So-
that is page 2,
Yeah, so that was just.
paragraph 3. Mr. Borden, what do you want it to say?
Inquired about transportation funds.
Inquired about transportation funds, inquired if transportation funds the buses going around town, and inquired where the South Acton train station funds go.
Yeah, some of that effect.
Very good. Any other edits to 12:10? No. I will entertain a motion at this time. I believe that somebody was scribbling down which ones were amended and which ones weren't.
One at a time, Mr. Chair.
All at once.
All right, then I move that we accept the minutes of 11:05, 11:19, 11:25, and 12:10.
Second. As amended.
As amended? Very good. Who seconded?
I did.
Roland did.
Yep.
Since Dave did not end up dialing in, we do not need to do a roll call vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Are there any abstentions? We are done with that. Last item of business on the agenda is liaison reports. Are there any liaison reports at this time? We were all at the first half of the select board meeting last night. Mr. Jarbo.
Yeah, I attended a couple meetings of the Economic Development Committee, and part of the reason why I'm encouraging everybody to try to fit into their schedule the briefing that they're going to have on January 22nd at 7 p.m. at the Acton Recreation Center is we see a second example of what you can do when you get a consultant tackling the problem. This consultant actually comes out of Virginia, but took a look at what we could do to beef up our economic development efforts in a way that would have material impact on the about 10% of the town that is currently paying commercial real estate as opposed to the 90% of the town that's paying residential real estate. And to the extent that we can tackle that set of issues, it certainly will, I think, have benefits to our budget discussions, not just this year, but next year and the year after and the year after that. I have gotten a sneak preview of some of the insights that they've come up with, and they are surprising. But that is, again, I hate to say this, the benefit of getting somebody who has done this in a variety of other communities and can see us in ways that sometimes we don't see because we live here. So it will be eye-opening, thought-provoking, and hopefully, down the road, very beneficial for the community.
Thank you. Any other liaison reports?
I don't see anything. I did attend one, but I don't have my notes.
Okay. I believe, is there anything that I'm missing? Then I will, you go ahead, Mary Ann.
Just a quick question. Just for the notes, Scott, is that the health insurance trust you're referring to? Okay, thank you.
I did attend. I don't have notes in front of me.
If it would help, I can quickly summarize, if that's good. Okay. So as Scott had mentioned, the Health Insurance Trust met last Thursday morning. They meet monthly. I think what's happening now, in the past couple of meetings, because they are no longer responsible for the payments of claims, that it is now at the town and the school side. So we do the quality assurance, we do the payments. So they're still involved with the runoff, the runout claims. And I think, as Mr. Sullivan had reported out at the last FinCom meeting, which was really good news, is that Blue Cross Blue Shield finally came around to agree with the trust that they will use the 600 and some odd thousand dollars that was in escrow to pay the runoff claims versus us having to pay. And I saw Steve smile and shake his head because that was a big help and a big decision. And I think to your point, Steve, earlier, is that we really do need to continue to keep a very close eye on health insurance costs in fiscal year '26. They will be coming out with the exact rates, Meyer, at the MMA conference, the end of January. We did budget for what they are estimating, but also is a key reminder is that we decided to stay with Aetna, if you remember, for our retirees, to keep the costs down. We will be required to go to Blue Cross Blue Shield January 1st, 2026. That was discussed as well, and that will be a cost. So that's, I think, probably in summary what we spoke about at the trust meeting. One quick question is that when you all vote, do associates, Mr. Lenz, do you have a vote? No, okay. So it's 900. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And with that, Mr. Lenz, we have your opportunity to do your first act for the committee.
I move to adjourn.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Dave's not here. Thank you very much. Welcome to the committee, Mr. Lenz.